The idea for a game to work with the controller's benefits is obvious, but what about a game that works with its detriments? The Wii U Gamepad is great, but it's still slightly cumbersome, and the inbuilt screen, while unique, can potentially distract if you need to focus on it and the TV simultaneously. However, one game opted to take the gamepad in its stride, for all its positives and drawbacks, and create an incredibly unique survival horror experience. I've been excited to talk about ZombiU for a while now. Nintendo Land showcased how the gamepad could function brilliantly in multiplayer minigames, whereas New Super Mario Bros. U demonstrated how quickly it could be brushed aside. ZombiU, on the other hand, aims to offer a full experience with the gamepad as the focal point. The game was developed by Ubisoft Montpellier as one of the exclusives Ubisoft were publishing on Wii U alongside Rayman Legends, but we'll get onto how that panned out later. Originally, the game saw life as something both so similar yet so different, under the mantra "killer freaks from outer space." The London setting is there, the graphical presentation is pretty near identical, but the main enemies were small and quick alien creatures instead. If they went ahead with this, then the game would have to be very different. But Ubisoft took one look at how the gamepad coordinated with the player and shifted the style accordingly, replacing the enemies with plodding yet dangerous zombies en masse. Did it work out? Let's see. ZombiU begins with an overshot of a fallen London. The apocalypse has devastated the city, with zombies running amok. However, as one survivor tries to scavenge for supplies, a voice from an underground station calls out to him.
Over here. Come down into the station.
Yes, you.
I've got eyes on you. Follow my voice. In the tube.
From there, you play the role of this scavenger as he traverses deep into the station until coming across the Voice's safe house. Here they introduce themselves as the Prepper, someone who is willing to work with you in order to survive. And that is the main mantra for this game: survival. First things first, I love how different ZombiU feels in its opening sequence. Very rarely do you get dropped into a game before the epidemic starts. In Resident Evil 1, for example, you're sent to investigate a missing squad that reveals zombies for the first time. But ZombiU is in media res. The apocalypse is here and you're just trying to venture through it, similar to Resident Evil 3. On top of this, your character that you play as is never the same. It's not like you make your own one, but rather the survivor you play is randomly generated in character model and name. It does a great job making you feel like you're simply an insignificant survivor. You're not Jill Valentine or Leon Kennedy, some extraordinary protagonist that saves the day. You're a person caught up in a whole lot of shit just trying to stay alive, which there's no guarantee of. One of the main gimmicks of ZombiU is that if your current character dies, that's them done. You'll respawn as someone else and be able to kill that previous survivor to scavenge supplies from, or, while sparingly nowadays, other survivors from around the world connected to the internet. But, thankfully, I consider myself a gamer of the gods, so I don't think we'll be seeing anyone other than Callum Harvey. It's ride or die with him, bro. So at the beginning, after the Prepper advises you to go to a supermarket for supplies, the next logical course of action is Buckingham Palace.
I've had an idea. I think it's time we got eyes on Buckingham Palace and took a look around.
This is pretty accurate to London, to be fair. The only two places of note really are Buckingham Palace and the Morrisons down the road. But after navigating through the palace, you'll find a doctor who is working on a cure, who enlists you to find resources for him. And after obtaining what he needs from the palace, then later a block of flats, he sends you on a general errand to find 7 letters scattered around London, which then introduces another character. It's kind of how the game goes.
This is Sandra to all surviving Ravens. Nest 6, 18, 19, 22 and 34 have been raided by vultures. Situation still evolving.
In reality, the story is just kind of there, and I do have my issues with it, but for now I want to focus on the gameplay. ZombiU feels like quintessential survival horror. You start off just getting by, scavenging for essentials, before going out into other areas, finding more things, then returning back to areas you've been to, which then allow you to access new places. The safe house is literally your safe room of sorts that you can always return to, whilst you'll be going backwards and forwards between a lot of areas multiple times, often doing 2 different things: exploring and fighting. Let's start with the former, as it's the one that's most relevant to the Wii U. After obtaining the Prepper's own kit called the BOB at the beginning of the game, it gives your gamepad its full functions. While ZombiU plays and looks like a typical horror-themed FPS, there are functionalities in the game that, while it could be used with buttons, are revolved around the gamepad's hardware. Firstly, its screen. Just walking around the main world will display a map of some form on the gamepad, with a scanner that can help you locate zombies within your radius. This scanner also has a feature where, while aiming with the gamepad's gyrometer, you're able to identify what's around you, such as items, enemies, doors, etc. You'll also do it to activate certain things, such as finding camera boxes around London, which will allow the Prepper to hack into them and give you a map of that area. I really like the inclusion of this. Recently I beat Resident Evil 8, and while I loved it, there were notable moments where the map says an item is still somewhere I can't find for the life of me, which led to the flow lagging at times. Whereas here, ZombiU's scanner streamlines this for the better. You go into an area, you scan, you see if there's anything significant, and you progress. By no means is this a quick process, but rather a slower, constant pace is maintained throughout. And I quite like this because it incentivizes and rewards a meticulous approach, as well as giving the player tools to make this as painless as possible. If I missed something, it would be my fault. There were some areas where I didn't find the CCTV box, which, while not unplayable, is definitely advantageous. It never felt unfair when this occurred either, it was just somewhere that I hadn't looked at hard enough. Conversely, it was incredibly fulfilling looking for and finding one. There's a degree of rewarding the player due to their effort put in, which is a great trade-off. Another thing designed around the gamepad is the inventory and unlocking system. As you hold everything in your backpack, you only have 6 open slots, which include your flashlight and melee weapon. To swap between things, you do so by opening your backpack with the gamepad, yet this doesn't pause the game, meaning you're vulnerable to attacks. This is a fantastic use of the gamepad, especially in a survival horror setting. The threat of an enemy is ever present no matter what you're doing. A zombie's distant snarl can envelop you in a sense of panic, making it more stressful to do anything when needing to look at the gamepad. I remember more than a few times I needed to quickly glance between the screen and the TV just to make sure I was good. This is also done incredibly well in other moments where the game designers purposefully take this idea in stride. Here's one example. I've just climbed up a block of flats, gatecrashed a banging party that thankfully nobody seems to mind, and reached a room where I needed to open a safe. So I explored the room for the code, found it, and as I start putting it in, having an enemy attack at a time where you'd be preoccupied is genius. It takes a legitimate issue of the gamepad and it fine-tunes it to complement the gaming experience overall. These are done admittedly quite rarely throughout the story, and while part of me wishes that they did more like it, it doesn't stop the fact I couldn't ever lockpick or code crack at peace. So exploring is done excellently, yet there's still the matter of combat. Like in most survival horror games, you're at the behest of your weapons and mercy of your enemies, and this is where I think ZombiU is a bit rougher. The weapons are pretty straightforward: a handgun, a shotgun, a sniper, a crossbow, and, as is tradition with every British person, a cricket bat to hand. You can't leave the house without one, and like all cricket bats, this one doesn't break no matter how many times you give a zombie a bloody great bonk to the noggin. The bat is almost too powerful on some occasions. It can effectively stun zombies endlessly, which, while useful in a game where ammo conservation is important, it starts to get a bit tedious. Zombies generally take anywhere between 5 to 8 hits in my experience to stay down, so doing that constantly wore a bit thin. A potential improvement in my mind would be a scale of different powered hits, this one in conjunction with a more powerful one that maybe has a shorter range or longer window to swing. I don't know, just something to think about. The guns can be broken into 2 types, analog controlled and gyro controlled. Your regular handgun and shotgun only need the right stick to aim with, which, in all honesty, something about the gamepad makes it quite tough to aim. Maybe it's just me, but after whiffing a few easy shots, I turned on the aim assist option in the menu. Trust me, No wait, Callum needed it. He's trying his best, bless him. But some of the scoped weapons instead use the gyrometer. I think it's actually a really ingenious way to emulate them, as it usually takes a moment or two to properly set them up or aim them, and getting the gamepad in position to do it right feels like a great proxy. So you often favour the scope for long ranges, while regularly you can just pick off zombies with a few good headshots. But don't get it twisted, they're no pushovers. Zombies have 2 types of attacks. One is just a general swipe at you that can do damage, and the second, while it takes longer, is an instant kill. So when I said ride or die, I may have meant die to get footage. So while this may have looked accidental, this was totally intentional. But don't worry, I've got a new character now, and with Millie Bell, we're making it to the end. Unfortunately, on my journey back to Buckingham Palace, I had to put down our previous survivor Callum, so here's one for you, pal. In amongst the regular zombies, there are a few variations on them. Some are fully guarded and take more hits, some are in highly explosive gear which won't ever backfire, and then there are zombies with special attributes to them. One emits yellow sparks that scream and catch the attention of all zombies in an area, one has red flames that are harder to kill yet often hold a useful item, and the last has a white smoke to it, able to hit you with a ranged spit attack. I hated these guys the most for sure. I'm not sure why I find it so annoying, considering I'm able to use a literal sniper, but the fact they blind you and do decent damage from a range, as well as needing to preserve ammunition, meant that whenever I encountered them I was less than pleased. But to not finish this segment on a bum note, I will say possibly one of my favourite parts about the combat in this game is the music. The composer is Chris Velasco, who has some excellent game soundtracks to his name, and ZombiU is no different. I'm a bit worried about using it as anything more than background music, so here's a link to the album on Spotify in the description. But whenever you engage in combat with a zombie, an incredibly menacing and anxiety-dreading score accompanies you. You'll have to take my word for it so as to not risk being DMCA'd up the arse by YouTube, but it's another great soundtrack to add to Velasco's track record. You'll be fighting arrays of zombies over a few different areas that are all connected to one another in some capacity. All of them look interesting and somewhat distinct, but I did find myself not fully remembering where everything was when revisiting, which is a small slight. In a vacuum, I quite like the game's graphics. The cold palette drives home how bleak everything feels. I especially think some of the graffiti and messages are the most striking. Look at this message someone put on the wall. How tragic. And look at this one on the side of a van, where it shows how many people don't subscribe to me on YouTube. Truly, a depressing sight to see. The zombies are admittedly a bit rough looking, the character models aren't the best but still do their job. Though the environments are really good in my opinion. Buckingham Palace for instance is very unique yet still fits in perfectly. But with how everything is connected with different passageways throughout the underground of London, it all started to blur together. Nearly all means to get to places you load to and from have practically the exact same design. If it weren't for the game's waypoint system, then I'd really struggle to know where I'm going, albeit I think that's a bit of a nitpick. And on top of this, you can find manholes and areas to fast travel from location to location, which is another great plus to exploration. What isn't a nitpick on the other hand, are the load times. They're quite long, and while it's not the end of the world, when you're sat in a loading zone for 15 to 20 seconds while the Wii U sounds like it's beckoning for death, it really makes you think about life up to that point. And just another small thing, the game can occasionally show a touch of weird things. Like being able to hit a zombie over the head so hard that they jump up the stairs. Or here, where second survivor Millie is just navigating through this area near some flats and...
Hello? Hello? Answer me.
So after reincarnating as Eli Simpson, I went back to that area, scavenged off her so dead she's not even a zombie Millie, and tried to see if I could replicate what she did, and nope. That's some grade A bullshit right there. The jank in this game isn't unplayable per se, but there were definitely moments that had me mega frustrated. I got stuck in a wall when a zombie hit me into it and had to reset the game in order to get out of it, right near the finishing sequences of the game too. So I think ZombiU could have done with a bit more fine tuning to make sure everything worked as expected, but nothing here is truly unplayable. I might as well get into the story fully now, so skip to this time point if you're absolutely keen to play the game for yourself. But I will be upfront, the story is the weakest part of the game, and if you're going to play it at any point, it should be entirely for the gameplay. Also, not trying to brag or anything, but this part is like my favourite part I edited, so please don't miss it out unless you absolutely want to. So, from the part where I need to obtain 7 letters for the doctor, a woman called Sandra. Her name is Sandra. I definitely didn't say Sandra in the first time I read this line, because her name is Sandra. Totally. Interrupts my signal to give a notice to any survivors listening that an evacuation is happening now at Tower Bridge.
Help us, and we'll get you out.
This was at the Prepper's dismay, however, as throughout the game so far he had constantly spoken ill of the Ravens of D up to that point, resisting the idea that there's a cure or anything left for the world. But fuck that! This was the time for me and Eli to get away from it all. Unfortunately, it evidently appears that Sandra's AI is a cold-hearted bitch, as when I was heading to where she said I needed to go, she decided to shoot me and kill me. Now I know what you're thinking, isn't the AI just shooting zombies and it's my fault for getting in the way of their shot? Well, la-di-da, Mr. fucking clairvoyant, it doesn't stop the fact that she just committed a hate crime. Begrudgingly, I made it to where I was with a Mr. Edward Williams, cheesed the section where the zombies and Eli were, before finally making it closer to the Tower of London gates. It was a bit of an endeavour, not on the most health in the world, but hey, I weathered the worst of it. Wait. Ah.
Thought you were better prepared than that.
So with my favourite character that is still alive, Zara Mari, I carried on Edward's legacy to actually make it fully to the Tower of London, and just in time because the helicopter is pulling up. Eli may not have made it, Edward not much better, but Zara was different, and she'd do... Fortunately for me, the helicopter had a slight technical issue of being swamped by birds and exploding, so this wasn't the end of the line. So, guess we best go get some petrol or something with Ben Lloyd. And not gonna lie, this is where I started to lose count of all the survivors and their names. My heart had been broken one too many a time to let it hurt me anymore. My main grievance with the story is that it feels rather disjointed, and more so a collection of smaller things that maybe could link together. Your main goal was to get the Doctor the 7 letters of John Dee, a Tudor occultist who in this game predicted the apocalypse. The Ravens of Dee are in tribute to his namesake and are trying to save the world, whereas the Prepper is much more cynical and begrudging of the fact. You can find out later that, major spoilers here, the Prepper was a member of the Ravens of Dee that was kicked out who Sandra previously had dated. But you may notice I don't have footage for this. And that's because while this is clearly a thing that happened, thanks to the good folks at the ZombiU Wikipedia page, you can, which in my case I did, completely avoid all of these things. Sometimes you find letters and other documents around ZombiU that give context clues for what's going on, but you can just accidentally skip them, which I maybe did. But even then, you can only read them or view them on the Gamepad, so it means very little to me or to you. And yeah, I didn't really care for the story. The gameplay is easily the main draw to ZombiU. Anyways, as a brief rundown for the rest of the game, you need to get antibiotics for a rather perturbed gentleman. Ben came down with a small case of dying in an explosion. This person continued their legacy and then killed the weird fella. Then they went somewhere where there was a distress call, and it turns out British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has turned the UK into a monarchy again. So he died, I left, found all the letters for the Doctor, the Prepper was pissed, I went back to get the vaccine, turns out the Doctor is now a zombie, died a few times along the way before escaping the palace in time for the Ravens of Dee to get me. Prepper's pissed, I'm gone, he walks into the safe house and finds someone else to manipulate because he's secretly a dickhead all this time, except it's not so secret because we knew he was one. And then the ending sequence of the game happens. ZombiU has 2 endings, although there's no real difference. One's a good ending where you make it to the helicopter and survive, and the bad ending is where your character dies and the cure is never retrieved. I know, I've joked a lot about me dying in this game a bunch, but this final stretch was one where I was determined to get a good ending. This wasn't just for me. This one was for Callum. This one was for Millie. This one was for Eli. For Edward. For Zara. For the other unnamed people that may or may not be dead. This one was for Britain. My homeland. My country. The soil that I've lived on for... Oh well. And that was ZombiU. I kind of rushed the story section for that last bit because I didn't want this video to go on for too long, though I think the artist in me can call that connotative. Literally, the ending of the game kind of just hits you in the face. One moment you've done your penultimate story arc, the next you're scavenging for the last few letters, and then like 2 minutes later you're in the final sequence of the game up until the endings. I believe ZombiU favoured an approach where you're meant to get the letters in conjunction with the other main missions, but instead I just got them all after, which made everything go super fast at the end. Although, can I say after it's all said and done I'm disappointed? No. I really enjoyed my time with ZombiU, and I think it's a massively underrated game of the last console generation. The moments where it utilised the game mechanics and quirks of the gamepad were the game at its best, and I think it's the bar of sorts for a game on the Wii U to show off what the hardware is capable of. The setting and atmosphere was great, ignoring my biases, the soundtrack was fantastic, and I think the weapon system were fine throughout the whole game. It felt a bit like a Metroidvania, going back to areas with upgrades to allow me to pass through, although admittedly I've not played any Metroid games. Yet. The downsides are still quite significant. Graphically the characters are kind of ugly, the story was mediocre and unimportant, load times were a bore, I got stuck on occasion when I wasn't meant to happen, and sometimes combat was tedious. That said, I'd still give the game like an 8.5 out of 10. Very much a hidden gem. Which makes it all the sadder that it's this game that began to show the warning signs of the Wii U as a console. ZombiU didn't sell well. Despite being received well from critics, according to Ubisoft, it was not profitable. At all. Rayman Legends was meant to be an exclusive game to the Wii U, yet it was the reception here that prompted Ubisoft to both delay the game and then make it multi-platform to mitigate any sales losses. This then also led to ZombiU finding a life on other systems under the name Zombie and on PlayStation 4, Xbox One and Windows. Now, the only other one of those systems I play games on is Windows, and looking at the current Steam page for it, yeah, I'm good. But even then, if you're one of the 12 people out there who bought a Wii U, if you don't have ZombiU, get it. Even if you have other platforms to play it on, get it on Wii U if you can. It goes for dirt cheap nowadays. I think I got it for like £4, and you can do yourself the pleasure of playing one of the best yet understated survival horror games out there. Oh, I forgot, they have a survivor mode where you only have one character and one life. Nah, I'm good. Yo, just wanted to say a massive thank you if you've made it this far. I very much appreciate you watching the video. But I also wanted to just give a big shout out to a few particular commenters that I've had recently. There's Sal Cazada, very sorry if I butchered your name there, mate. Jimmy Fantage, and Monado Max. As someone who gets very easily discouraged with things, comments like these just blow my mind, and I cannot thank you all enough for your kind words. Yeah, and that's it. I just wanted to say very much thank you to you, whoever you are. If you're someone who leaves a nice comment or just even watches my stuff, it's grand. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Take care. Stay safe.